The following is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, in the heart of history, this is the Force Center podcast feed, also the Other Center podcast feed, and I'm Ken Knapsack.
And I'm Joseph Scrimshaw, and I'm thrilled to be here discussing the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Also, Indiana Jones. I read that title like it was an old library listing. The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones and.
Indiana Jones and what Dewey Decimal System number is attached to that? That's the question. Find out. Yes, this is Indiana Jones and the Perilous Podcasts, a series we launched on Patreon. So some of you might be listening now because you are supporting the Force Center team, and we really appreciate that. Some of you might be listening a little bit later when we release these to the public. We are in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny territory, the fifth movie of the series coming out shortly or already out, depending on when you're hearing this. So we're happy to have you all here as we turn our Force Center eye to the man in the hat.
Yeah, this is exciting, Ken. I've enjoyed discussing all of these films, but I've been really excited to discuss this one because it does have, a bit of controversy. I think probably the controversy has cooled, but I guess we'll find out when we put out this episode and see how people react. Yeah. We are discussing Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, released in May of 2008. It's a little over 2 hours runtime. Story by George Lucas and Jeff Nathanson. Jeff Nathanson involved in the Rush Hour films, the Spielberg film Catch Me If You Can. There are a couple of the big ones there. And then the screenplay is I got my note wrong, and I almost said the screenplay was by the person who wrote the last movie we discussed, but the screenplay is by David Koepp. David Koepp, responsible for, some films you might have heard of, like Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, the 2002 Spider-Man, and Mordecai, just to give a very well-rounded list of credits of the blockbuster scripting work that has been done by David Koepp and, directed by Steven Spielberg. Ken, do you have thoughts or reactions to the rotating cast of writers in the Indiana Jones franchise?
You know what? It is a little fascinating to me. And I knew these names, right? I get that. I've seen the movies. I've seen the credits. But I got to admit, I still kind of forget that Lawrence Kasdan didn't write all of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I feel like while the films try to stretch in different directions, genre-wise, theme-wise up to a point, they don't try to stretch stylistically when it comes to the dialogue. It does feel like everybody is doing their best Lawrence Kasdan up to a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was reading some of the notes in the research. Kasdan may have been brought in for some of the relationship, basically marrying Indy dialogue here. I don't have that as a fact in front of me. It's just something I was reading on a wiki, and that makes sense too. And I enjoy that. But yeah, I totally agree with you that they did such a good job, the entire team of Raiders, and they did such a good job, not copying, that's not right, but even studying how Douglas Slocum shot them, right? There's some quotes about Spielberg about this is a challenging movie because I've evolved, but I had to kind of go back to a style that I had evolved from and all that kind of thing. So it's fascinating, but it relates to the writers and stories. I get the sense, I mean this in the best way possible, that George, when it comes to stories and writing, he's got some ideas and thoughts, and it might maybe occasionally be hard to push him off of the thoughts. And I mean that in a good way, right? But it's like a lot of the names, and I think that helps. And these are big names who know what they're doing.
Yeah, I really love that about the legacy of Indiana Jones, that George Lucas is often the driving force, and there's some fun sort of push-pull behind the scenes, and you get to decide as a viewer once you're sitting down, it's like, this is obvious. All these films are obviously a combination of Spielberg, Lucas, and everybody else involved, but they can kind of tip a little bit. And I love that this one really is like, Lucas is like, I'm not moving off the aliens. Okay, we can call them interdimensional beings, but I'm not moving off of it. And I love that about Lucas, that he gets an idea and he's like, I love this idea. I want other people to help me realize it, but I love this weird bonkers idea that maybe other people wouldn't do and would maybe go to something a little bit more expected or a little bit more traditional, and him going, nope, I want to swing for the fences. And just screenplay wise, I think David Koepp did a great job of doing the final pass. Obviously, Frank Darabont involved in as well. If you read all the Wikipedias, or if you write the Wikipedias, truthfully, Frank Darabont was involved. I think a lot of just the line by line dialogue has a great indie style, has a great pitter patter, and I would absolutely believe that Lawrence Kasdan was involved in the really sharp back and forths between Indy and Marion.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. And even we're obviously here to get deep, but in terms of just the script and the story and everything on the page, it really works for me. It all makes sense. And it's, then you have to go shoot the films and make the films and edit the films. And that's where maybe sometimes some people might feel things get lost. And I can understand that with this as well. But I just, even some of the scenes that we're going to talk about that maybe I have a problem with or you have a problem with, or maybe this pop culture is a problem with, I still think on paper it worked. I still think the script is great. And I love that.
Yeah, I think so too, and we can move on into some of our main thoughts here. I'll say that 3 times, spoiler. But I think that what I appreciate about Lucas, jokingly kind of calling him, the punk in flannel who's got a Sbarro's pizza in one hand and a middle finger to the camera in the other, like he's Johnny Cash at heart. That there's that sense to me of the ideas of like, I know a lot of people aren't going to like the idea that if India's in the 50s, he started out in the 30s, inspired by the adventurous heroes of the 30s. If we move him into the 50s, I want him inspired by the B movies and all of the anxieties around them of the 1950s. That is an idea that I think it's the kind of idea in modern Hollywood that if you brought to a manager, an agent, an executive, they'd just say, no, period, done. Right. And it is a part of Lucas's power of like, this might not work for everybody, but it works for me. It's my vision. It's my passion. And I want to make it happen. Yeah. That spirit that's there in a lot of Lucas's ideas. Same thing with the prequels. Like if you just ask people, what do you want the prequel story to be? No majority audience of original trilogy fans would have voted for learning how kind young Darth Vader was, and he's just like, no, that's the story I'm telling. Period. And I think that spirit shines through everything, and I like it. And I, of course, understand other people don't.
Yeah. We'll break that down, though.
We will. Okay, let's talk about our experience of viewing it this time around. We got a lot on our plates. It's a busy time in the world. What prep did you do for this rewatch of Crystal Skull?
I've been Jonesy to get here on this one, and in researching and writing some other projects for some jobs I'm doing now with the new Rockstars folks and over at Fandom, and Indy's been Indy's in the headlines again, right? So I'd been looking through a lot of the wikis or a lot of this or watching behind the scenes featurettes this last 2 weeks, and a lot of stuff had come up about Crystal Skull, obviously, and some stuff started to emerge on like the themes in this movie, and then I hadn't watched it earlier this year. I'd watched it. Grace and I wanted to watch it, right? And I think I had said this on one of our previous broadcasts. Like that was the first time I'd seen it since the theater.
Wow,
it was a weird relationship I have with this movie. And as I said before, I walked out of the theater in 2008 and loved it. Oh, we're supposed to hate this. Oh, okay, you're right. So and I enjoyed that viewing here, but I don't. You're a wonderful talent when it comes to breaking down themes, Joseph. I don't know your process, but sometimes for me, I need the pieces to slowly fall into place, or I'll hear something, see something, read something, or think something. I go, oh yeah, okay, then that moves here. Okay, yeah, I'm starting to get a better picture. Well, that kind of happened in my research for just Indy overall, and I was just, I can't wait to watch this because I think I've already got some new eyes on it. You know what I mean? Like I'm already like, oh, that's right. That is one of the things in this film. Oh, what does that mean? And then I got super excited to finally watch it in parts over the course of 9 days. Watch it twice over the last 9 days in parts because of life being busy, but happy to be here.
Yeah, I was really excited to watch it in the flow. The last time I watched it, we just watched Raiders, and then my wife was like, hey, I want to watch all of them. So we watched them, I think, like 4 nights in a row, and then started watching the Young Indie Adventures when we realized those were available. And for me, just really watching all 4 of the films that existed up to this point in a flow, it doesn't feel that different. So I was excited to rewatch it now after watching all of the first 3 with a little bit more of our our analysis fedoras on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really excited to get for this one. I did watch it. I did have to break it up a little bit in parts, but for me, it was a real special viewing of Crystal Skull, because the idea of fathers is certainly very present in Indiana Jones, with meeting Indy's father, and then with Indy becoming a father in this one. And also, it's just I think, at least for people of our generation who were young when Indiana Jones came out, I'm sure it's true for other people, this is a movie that sometimes dads like. I think dads want to imagine their Harrison Ford, likable and can make mistakes, but ultimately real cool. I can see how dads would gravitate toward wanting to be like, yeah, no, if I was president, I'd punch a guy in my plane. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. So my dad loves Indiana Jones. I'm hoping that I can time it to go to Minnesota and watch Dial of Destiny with him. I won't belabor this, because I'm sure it'll come up again on Force Center. As we're recording, my father-in-law passed away just a couple days ago. And I know he liked Indiana Jones as well. And when we were at Disneyland with him recently, we were bummed out that the Indiana Jones ride wasn't open at the time, so he could go on it. So I was definitely, in my feelings about family and fathers, and I think that's such an important part of this film that it made it land even heavier with me. So that definitely affected my viewing. Beyond that, all my normal rituals. I had a little glass of whiskey. I got my Indiana Jones action figures. I found the Marion in a dress with the monkey. So Marion and the monkey watched with me, which I love that action figure, because it's just so weird. But this film is the return of Marion, and I always forget also the prominent return of monkeys. A lot of the important characters of Raiders of the Lost Ark are back.
Yeah. Yes. I would love to, know that if they're kind of a distant relative of the monkey from Raiders. Rest in peace, monkey.
They should have been eating dates. Would have been great. All right. Where does this film rate for you? This is kind of our overview. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of the big thematic ideas, but after wearing our analysis fedoras, where does it rate for you? Are you challenged by it? Do you love it? Does it feel the same? Where do you go?
Yeah, look, as of this recording, there's 4 of these films out, and we do a rate and a ranking. This might come in 4th for me, sure, but I'm telling you all, it's good. Stop it. Stop your fridge jokes. Stop your swinging monkey jokes. Okay, we can make a couple. Stop it. It's good. And there's some conversations to be had around things in this movie that I will get to, Joseph. I really don't think it's just about this movie. I think it's about 2008 filmmaking. 2008 is a fascinating year of filmmaking, where Iron Man comes out. We are 2 years after Daniel Craig's Bond and that world. And how do we do it? And Quantum of Solace coming out this year as well. Dark Knight. It's a weird, different time where the nerd culture is exploding, but Comic-Con is getting bigger thanks to the Twilight folks, but it's not what it would become in 2010 to 2015, 16 range. And it's a different era. And there's a lot of things in this movie, CGI wise, or just set piece wise, that was like, cool. Oh, let's do this because we can. And that doesn't necessarily mean you always should. And we might get to that. And so that's where spending a lot of time in this movie in the last week to actually last month and thinking about this and talking about this movie, texting with some friends who I know. Shout out to PJ Campbell and PLD over the Two Mediocre White Guys podcast, where they're reviewing Individuality. We text all the time about this movie. It's got some things to point at, but I just think overall this is way better than you remember, or way better than you want to give it credit to. But also, yeah, I mean, you're going up against Raiders of the Lost frickin' Ark, man. You try making any movie that even comes close to that, or Last Crusade, or Temple. Like, this is iconic, and I think it continues the legacy way, way better than people want to admit.
Yeah, I really agree with you. I think it has been interesting to see some of our friends in the Star Wars, podcasting streaming space come out swinging on social media, defending this film. And in particular, our friends that are a little bit younger. This might be my bias, but for me, the reaction in 2008 was very much social media was in its infancy with MySpace and Facebook, so not quite that resounding conversation. So it was more for me, the people around me, and it was, here we go again. It's the prequels all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was that combination of, we desperately want this thing that we love from our childhood back, and we somehow want it to magically be exactly what it was, and yet somehow different, grittier, darker, more adult. And we don't want just a new story. We somehow want it to make us feel like we did in the summer of 81, which is literally impossible. So I feel like for some of the people around me, for some of the criticisms that I heard, that was my experience of it in 2008 of here we go again. People want something literally impossible out of this film. So taking a step back from that 2008 experience where I liked it, I loved it, and then everybody was real mad about it. So it's like, okay, so be it. I've fought in the prequel wars. I'm gonna abstain from this.
You know what? Yeah, actually, there's a little bit of that, and I think at some point, maybe especially early Schmoes days, I might have kicked the can on this movie too. It's an easy joke to make. They're easy jokes to make, and I think that's what, going back to 2008. I wish I could have the power to just greenlight documentary series that I could watch, because I love them. I want one on 2008 because it factors in things you're talking about. Yes, MySpace, Friendster obviously been around for about 5-6 years, but Twitter was emerging. The instant conversation, the back and forth was a little bit in its infancy, like you're saying there, and that this kind of stuff was what was fueling it, and it's not just, there's this attitude of like, oh, we go back and reevaluate these movies and we forget how bad they were, and then that's when like the younger generations come into it, because they're engaging with it differently. For some, this was their first indie, or definitely the first indie in the theater. So yeah, they're going to have a different engagement with it, which is how it should work. But when we take what we, the analytic fedora that you've helped construct over here, when you engage with what the movie's saying, when we engage with what the artists are saying, what they're trying to do, yes, there's always going to be things. Again, we're going to talk about some of there's some set pieces and stuff in here that not my favorite in terms of in the indie canon. But what it's saying is, this is one of the more richer movies in the franchise for me. And that's what I think's happening. We are in a time where you look back at the snarky, online, mostly, film community emerging in 2008, and movies were just starting to get reviewed on YouTube in 2007 range. You look back, and I think it's a fight against that kind of thinking. It's not deep, it's not intellectual, and not everything needs to be deep, and not everything needs to be intellectual when we talk about movies. But I think that is what's happening these days. Looking back and going, no, and it starts with, it's a movie set in the 50s. It's an homage to 50s sci-fi films. That seems so simple. It seems so simple, but I guarantee you, there's still people going, oh, I didn't see that. And I'm not saying it to make fun of them. I'm saying that starts your path into a deeper engagement with this film, any film. And I think that comes out of that era, what you're talking about. That was very much, I walked out of that Cinerama Dome going, man, that was fun. Oh no, I'm being told I'm an idiot. Okay, I'll back off.
Yeah, I think there's so much to engage on in this film. Particularly exciting to me is the level and depth of what it's wrestling with in terms of B movies in the 50s and what is going on with those movies, which we will talk more about for sure. But I think I've said before, I feel like if you don't like the nuking the fridge, even if something for fantasy, Indiana Jones level fantasy, it's too unbelievable and you don't enjoy it, I totally understand. And I understand it in the same way of, if you're watching Rise of Skywalker and you're really wanting to understand how Palpatine came back, and you're told it's a combination of dark magic and horrific science, and that isn't enough for you and you're distracted. Those are criticisms that I really, really get. But I feel like there's so much snark that builds up around them. And I feel sometimes there are viewers who can get so put off by one strong thing at the top of the film is done for them. And for people who are just really like, yep, that doesn't work for me, like, with total respect, I would always say, like, if you want to watch this, try to put that out of your mind and don't let that, be this one drop of poison that pollutes the entire thing for you. So you can try to see the rest of it and see if there's something more there for you.
Yeah, I really agree with that, and I think part of that as well is I've grown. One of the things I understand, but I've grown tired of the nostalgia conversation. And yeah, oof, big oof. It's such a bland word. It's a bland word to describe things, especially when a movie like this, similar to Star Wars, obviously, it's a thing with George. Ever seen American Graffiti? A little bit of nostalgia dripped in that. Where were you in 62? Like, but it's important for us to have a relationship with it. We all have that relationship with nostalgia. You ever go to your old hometown and drive around the streets and get depressed because you're like, should I have left? Did I leave at the wrong time? What if I never left? Oh God, I'm glad I left. We have a relationship with the past as we battle with the present, as we grow old, as we change. And this is an older indie, and all those things are there. And the nostalgia is part of the point. It's our relationship. And I think this was one of those movies where I think just, especially in 2008, you see it on the screen and you know the character, you've seen the movies. And so you just go, oh, we're doing this again. Sometimes it's stopping you at the gate. You're gatekeeping yourself to something else. And again, you and I always give the caveats. We give the caveats, opinions, this and that. Things don't work. Of course, Temple of Doom. We already talked about some of the things I don't like in it that I love. That's not what this is all about. If you're listening to this deep in the podcast and you follow along, you've been moved by it. You've connected with it. And don't just stop. I saw someone tweet out, oh, God, I totally forgot that this movie starts with Elvis Presley to remind us we're in the 50s. What's
yeah?
the point of that? Yeah.
There's more going on there than that. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway,
we'll talk about it. And also, why would that be bad?
Why would that be bad? Yeah. No. And so I'm having, I'd want to try to avoid being grumpy, but this movie is at a center point of me just kind of wanting to politely grab people by the collars and shake them and going, but what does this make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those movies on that list.
Yeah. No, I really agree with all that. I think for me, in terms of analyzing what is similar and what is different, because it is 19 years and it is Spielberg saying, I was trying to find a way to match this style and acknowledge my own evolution. And, Douglas Slocum isn't there, the cinematographer of the first three. So I think what struck me when I watched it, both the last times I watched it, is what's similar to me is the tone, the pacing, the structure, the themes. I think it's building on themes that have been really present in previous indie films. So it absolutely just feels like an indie film. I think Harrison Ford is remarkably consistent, and it isn't just about his, oh wow, he's in his 60s and he can still punch. He's there. He's the character, and the character is the same but has evolved. All those things. To me, what's different is the visual. I think Kaminsky, the new cinematographer, did an admirable job of matching Slocum, but it is a little bit more bright in places. Yep. And I think that was a little bump for me this time around. And the biggest thing, there's so much discussion about CGI, which when it came out in 2008 was partially because the filmmakers had talked so much about we're doing all these real stunts. And they did. They really threw real human bodies around. Yeah. But then they, cleaned up, enhanced with CGI. But reading about it more in the last couple of days, the Wikipedia talks about how Spielberg was like, I want to spend time with my family. I don't want to fly to 800 different places across the world. So to me, the visual difference is far less about the CGI, far less about 2008, and more about Spielberg's dinner plans with his family, which, bless the man, all credit to him, balancing art and life. But that to me is what looks different. The sets in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull are phenomenal. But there's some phenomenal shots, but some of the shots that in the other films are on location, they're convincing, but they don't quite capture that same globe-trotting style when there's like, that's just a film camera pointed at an actual desert. That's actual Petra. That's actual, ancient carved stone. I think there are some beats in here for me where I do feel the lack of the tactile in the locations. And it's not the CGI so much about the stunts. It's about the comping in the location photos.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And there's a point in this movie, there's a midway point when they kind of, by the time they're going to Peru and the real adventure kind of is kicking off, where I think I could almost divide the movie into two halves, where I think the first half is perfection, and I really stand by that. And a lot of the deep things emerge from the first half. And then once the adventure starts, you're putting words to what I've kind of been feeling. Now, remember, Temple of Doom there's a lot of soundstage stuff in Temple of Doom with Douglas Slocum. You can find articles on this, shot it in such a way that you don't feel that, right?
Mm-mm.
And this isn't I don't want super negative as some real talented people putting this together, but you do feel constricted by it a little bit. It does kind of come off as that. I remember having the first 5 minutes of Force Awakens at the Tuonall Village. I remember not engaged. I was like, oh God, it looks like they shot it. Did they rent the space? Like, what did they like? I just it didn't feel it, and it's sometimes not fair to these films. But you're right. That's a great research point. There was some thought going into this film that Spielberg was like, it's time for me to just produce and not direct it. But then they direct it. He directs it. And it's not that Spielberg knows what he's doing, but clearly he's at war with himself a little bit of like, I'm not this anymore. And one of the reasons he decided finally, all right, it's the right time and I'm going to direct it was he just come off 3 of his darkest movies and yeah, fun indie movie. Let's go do this. Like, And I think that could be some limitations. The CGI stuff, you're so right. It's that weird practical versus CGI has never been a correct, argument to have, because go back to Raiders. Did they really blow up Paul Freeman's head? Like it's a weird argument. It's just, again, it's 2008. Again, I want that documentary 2008. Anyways, I'm excited that you said that, because that's. I don't want to say Spielberg's wink link, because who am I to say Spielberg's wink link in anything? But there's some to the point where they shot at Yale because one of his sons was studying there. Sasha's in the fight scene. Great, put her in. She's got a great podcast with Alana Hayam now. I love her work, but you tell Spielberg's like, you know what? David Kelly goes home at 5 every day to go to Michelle Pfeiffer and his kids. I'm doing that too. And
I'm going to Michelle Pfeiffer and her kids. No.
Kate Capshaw. And he has that right. But yes, I feel that at times in the film.
Yeah, and to me it was less about because all the fight stuff is I love the fight stuff, and it looks very choreographed and very performed by real people, and the explosions are real. It's the environments for me that there's a little bit of distance from. Another thing that I did love about this big picture that I want to be sure to share is I was so fascinated to put on that analysis for Dora about the general tone of this one, because spending more time with the films and the behind the scenes stories of Raiders is this riff on both James Bond and 30s action adventure serials and captures lightning in a bottle and creates something new that is the Indiana Jones template. But then Temple goes way dark and way different. And then Last Crusade is almost reactionary to that. And I think Last Crusade is great, but it really swings hard towards humor and heartfelt. And it pushes away from the creepier, weirder, darker side of pulp and almost more leans into Western in the look and the theme. So you've got a trilogy of films, and you've got one that's just like this sort of lightning in a bottle that's like, this can never entirely be recaptured.
Yeah.
Then let's try to do something real different that's dark, then a reaction. So then what is the fourth one? And to me, what's fascinating about it is it feels like an excellent integration of everything that's come before. There's lots of heart, and there's a lot of the family issues carried over from Last Crusade. But then those darker, weirder pulp elements that to me are a little bit missing from Last Crusade are back. You got, people in skull masks, jumping out from the darkness, You have Indiana Jones strapped to a chair staring into a hypnotic crystal skull. You have a man sort of gruesomely devoured by ants and carried off into God knows what ant hell. The darker pulp is back. And it really feels like, okay, now we've grown beyond the 30s adventure serial inspiration. We've grown beyond the James Bond serial, and now indie is the template for indie. And I mean that for myself in a good way, not in a too much nostalgia. They're just aping what they've done before. it feels like is of this film. It is entirely its own thing.
Yeah, I switched computers. I had a little thing up from probably one of the wikis, probably the indie wiki and fandom, but there was a beat from George kind of saying, again, totally paraphrasing, I apologize, but maybe you have it in your notes. You can pick it up, Joseph. But the George kind of said that he was a little bit at odds with Harrison and Steven over that. No, this can change. I know you felt that this is all 3 movies set in the 30s and it's a serial adventure, like a Saturday morning thing. And George clearly loves that. But like, no, we can do 50s sci-fi. We could do something else. And this one of the reasons he really was convinced of that was seeing Harrison Ford with a beard in the Indiana Jones Chronicles episode, Young Indy episode, where, I wonder what this character is like in the 1950s. Yeah, we can do that, and we can do different styles. And Young Indiana Jones Chronicles is a thing that you and I are watching and studying and just absolutely obsessed with. At least I am. I'll speak for myself.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you.
Stylistically different from almost film to film. For better or worse, I guess you could say, but like, no, we can play around. This is an homage to films, an homage to art, the art that formed us, and it can do this. And maybe even, I would love to hear that conversation between those 3 titans of them going, no, it's got to be this. And I think that what you're saying is it moves a lot of it forward into a different style, but by remaining itself.
Yeah, and I think it deals with the themes and the ideas, and it's not structurally super like in a B movie of the 50s. It's more informed by the ideas and the anxieties and all that. Mm-hmm. So it structurally remains indie. Yeah, I read that quote and loved it as well. And I think that's what I was talking about in my going on about the punk in flannel, the rebel in flannel, is that Lucas seems to always have this idea of like, why not? I love ideas that open doors to giant canvases. The same way he's like, Star Wars does not need to be defined just visually by what was in the original trilogy. It's a massive galaxy with different time eras. So let's expand the palette in the prequels. Now they get to do the Clone Wars. We can do a straight up Kaiju Godzilla episode. We can do anything in Star Wars. And I love that he took that same, not anything, but this is a character that is of pulp and of the anxieties shaped by pulp. What is the pulp of this time? Let's move it forward. That's the spirit that I love, and I think is one of the other things that I wanted to talk about, briefly here at our for overall stuff. We'll get deeper into the ideas of it, but I think one of the really fascinating things about this movie is the first 3 films are inspired by Lucas and Spielberg's childhood in that they are remixing the adventure serials that they grew up with and the westerns that they grew up with and the James Bond movies that they grew up with. They are remixing the fantasy stories of their childhoods. But by updating it, not just to the B movies and in alien invasion movies of the 50s, but all of the real life paranoia and social horror of the Cold War, they are now messing around with their own childhoods. Lucas was 13 and Spielberg was 11 in 1957 when this movie was set. They lived through the Cold War and the Red Scare. I haven't heard interviews with them of like how did they interpret those ideas. But I think it's one of the things that makes this movie fascinating, and I think maybe challenging for people is it feels more real in some ways because it's digging even deeper into what was really going on in America, in the world, in 1957. It's more of a historical piece. I think you and I talked about it a little bit. I understand people bumping on Indy surviving, a nuclear or an atomic blast from a fridge, just from a sort of a logic, could that really happen standpoint? Is this too far? But watching it this time, Ken, when Indy stumbles out of the fridge, and there's that, to me, magnificent shot where he's seeing the mushroom cloud in the background. I think for people our generation who lived with the constant terror of, the possibility of nuclear war, and one of the things that I think has made Generation X kind of a little snarky and nihilistic is that you're probably not going to make it. You're probably, you and your friends are all probably going to be turned to dust and stone, sooner rather than later. to see Indy when we were young is this character of utter fantasy. We weren't alive in the 30s. We have no idea how real anything in Temple of Doom is. A nuke is very real to us. So seeing this figure of fantasy from our childhood in the 80s almost uncomfortably in reality.
Yeah.
And I think it made it even harder for people to sort of, I mean, you're a great example about how, Indiana Jones has never dealt in like great reality of like, could you survive falling out of a plane with an air raft? Well, none of us have gone through drills in school about how to survive falling out of a plane in a raft.
Yeah.
But we all did of our generation in the fear of nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much that tension between Indiana Jones being a figure of utter fantasy and dealing with a real horror that we grew up with affected how people our age responded so negatively to that early part of the film, and then that carried throughout the film.
This is great. This is going to be in the doc, 2008, the year that almost changed film. It's going to be in the doc. You're going to be talking ahead in this. This is fascinating. Yeah, no, and not to sound like gather round children, let us tell you about the times, but like, 1983, 84, 85, I was being taught to duck under little tiny, desks in case of, the capital R Russians attacking us. Alphaville's song Forever Young, hoping for the best but expecting the worst. Are you going to drop the bomb or not? It's a popular song for the time that a lot of you might know at karaoke. It is about this. It is about the tension of every day. Are we dying or not? It's a pretty fascinating time, and can't wait to get into more about the Red Scare. Something my father, who came over here to America in 1951 from Austria, but born in Russia. Born in Austria, but on the way from Russia. Like I can tell you the stories, right? Firsthand. It's my family's legacy of going to chase the American dream and having this country spit in your face and try to send you away. It's all very real. And that's why I think the first half of this movie, I think, is some of the deepest stuff in Indy. They are absolutely saying things. They're absolutely working through things. I wonder what that's doing. One of the things I did yesterday, I had a little downtime, watched that shot you're talking about of the cloud. I went on YouTube, and you can find there's declassified footage out there from years, but of some of the big tests, including the big one, the largest one on record with the Soviet Union tested. And the footage is terrifying and mesmerizing at the same time, right? And a lot of that energy is into it of just like, what the hell is this? And so, yes, it's a fridge gag that, by the way, George researched. He had papers that he told Stephen it's a 50% chance that you could survive. And there's a great series of quotes of Spielberg going, yeah, the nuke in the fridge meme, before he didn't say meme, but that's my fault. And then George saying, no, he's being nice. He's coming from me. This is my idea. I had researched it. I love it all. Maybe we just do a doc on that scene. Maybe it's that.
I think you could, because I think it is, everybody has different levels of sort of what level of fantasy they're able to accept. And what bumps them out of the film. And I really get that. Yep, that's a big swing. And I get that just without anything deeper than it's too much for me, it bumps me out of the fantasy. I get it. But I think there is so much deeper going on. And it is real different to go from a character who's, taking a leap of faith on a forced perspective bridge and watching, some dark magician pull a beating heart out. Those are fantasy.
Yeah.
It's different to see him up against the real horror.
There's an 800-year-old bleeping knight walking around. And you're like, that's right? Good. But a fridge? Yeah.
There should be a commentary track of The Crystal Skull from the perspective of that knight. And the knight can just say, he chose poorly, he chose wisely. And that's the entire commentary track.
I love that.
When he chooses the fridge, he'll say, he chose wisely. All right. I'm tempted to talk more about all the B-movie stuff, but I think it's going to come up as we get into the big theme. So let's do it. What are the big ideas for you? What ideas are at stake in this movie?
Oh, Joseph, let me tell you. There's a lot. I'll start with an overview. And by the way, you brought up some great stuff about family. I think there's some stuff in there about the nuclear family, a little parody of it in a way, actually seeing that, all that kind of things. But to me, there's this idea of trust. a big one of redefining your identity. This is about the search for knowledge and information. And when you can't have it, what do you do with that? And the truth and forming identities, a lot of stuff going on with identities. But the big one for redefining the identity comes to me from Indy, who has a long life at this point, right? He's been since July 1st, 1889. He's been 1899. Excuse me. He's been running around, and he is a professor. He's an archaeologist. He's an adventurer. He's a ladies' man. But now he's being tasked with: can you be a husband? Can you be a father? You lost your professor job. Who are you without that? There's a lot of redefining your identity, and when you don't know the next step, and you don't know the answers, and you don't know who to trust. We can run down the list, but there's a lot of stuff going on here as we dive into this conversation. And it all kind of is into this big one for me of redefining your identity, or what is your identity, forming your identity.
I love that. I think that's really, really powerful. It does. We find Indy kind of stuck and then thrown out of all of his various realities. And I love looking at it from that perspective of a torture test for who is he really, which I think they often do. I think real big picture for me, this is continuing themes that I think are present in every one of the films of testing Indy's character by asking, what is it is he going after and why? What's the real treasure? We've really tracked with all throughout the films, people accuse him directly of being a grave robber, much like the character is in our culture, understandably saying, are these films promoting this kind of plundering and disrespect to cultures? The films are always examining that. Maybe a little bit clumsy. We can talk about that. But I think just like Last Crusade, it gets pretty explicit about this is a question of what is the real treasure. And there's a lot of great pictures of what the people who I think we were meant to disagree with are after. They're after gold. They're after power. They're after this feeling of safety, this level of safety that is impossible and dangerous. And in contrast, the heroes that we end up agreeing with are pretty explicit about what the real treasures are, including knowledge, connection, personal experience. So I think it really lays out a lot of the ideas that have been present in the previous films and really reasserts them while also just putting them in entirely new context and new identities like you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I love this. There's so much stuff just in trying to discover. I like how you say discover what you're actually looking for. And by the way, I think every indie movie should deal with that, right? Because that's what this is about. And this dealing with that, dealing in a new time and what that means in a new time. And just running down the list of and trying to, what are you really searching for and who are you really searching with? American soldiers are actually Soviet soldiers. We see Indy's hat, the symbol of who he is or who he appears to be. Roswell, the information's hidden away. Mac, who's triple turning on Indy, which I remember in 2008 going, I don't like that. Now I think it's very thematically correct. He runs into a town that is not really a town. He meets his son without knowing his son. He doesn't know Marion was hiding the truth. Mutt doesn't know. And then the big thing of we're going to do an entire section on the Red Scare. But in the 1950s, America creates an identity for itself. I think one of the best scenes of all of Indiana Jones, the franchise, is Jim Broadbent's Dean character, Dean Stanforth, having this little conversation with Indy being essentially forced to forced to leave with pay because of the suspicion, the hysteria at the time. When this is the 1950s are exactly what you're talking about, and Lucas and Spielberg growing up in this time of was when that identity was formed. America is this, the rest of the world is that. And out of that comes the military-industrial complex. Comes, the nuclear family, the 2.5 kids, go to church on Sunday, and if you're not that, you're a pinko commie, and that's what you are. And all the truth, all this information that's buried with it, and you can either, not having all knowledge, the search for knowledge, or then knowledge to have power. Everything going on with Spalko, that her first line, one of her first early lines is that because I know things, and what I do not know, I find out. Because this power, this power. It's fascinating stuff. I'm barfing it all up, Joseph, because I really love all that. And that scene with Jim Broadbent, I watched it a few times. It's fascinating.
That was the thing that when I watched it like a year and a half ago with my wife, I was like, so caught up in the CGI and the in the nuke, and with Shia LaBeouf, a good actor to play his son. I was so caught up in all that. I was like, I didn't pay attention to how deep this film goes on the layers of the B movies and what's actually animating them at the time. So yeah, let's dive deeper into that. I want to barf with you. To me, I broke that theme down to knowledge versus paranoia. I think the film really plays with the fine line between a good desire to hunt knowledge and to want to know the truth versus knowledge becoming a paranoid witch hunt of wanting to know what everyone is thinking, want to control what everyone is thinking.
That's great.
And I think that's what I think this film doesn't get enough credit for is that those B movies of the 50s, like so many things that people turn their noses up of genre of, like, people in rubber suits for teens to scream at in the 50s, like all those films are deeply, deeply tied to the fear of being infiltrated from the outside by others. They are reflections of the fear of, we know how to fight a war. We know how to go, rah, 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 let's go punch a Nazi. We don't know how to fight the idea of a Cold War, the idea that there might be Soviets here, whispering their thoughts. And then that paranoia becomes, I think, control, an effort to control of, like, let's use the fear of that. Let's if anybody disagrees with what we want, these very traditional values, we'll accuse them of being a communist. We'll accuse them of being an outsider, and we'll force everybody into, as you were saying, like, these are the strict, rigid lines of defined of what is American, and you will not deviate from them. So this paranoia becomes a means of control. And I think, politicians at the time who were not afraid of communists anywhere, they weren't afraid of them in the halls of power in Washington, D.C. or in Hollywood, but use it as a tool to enforce their one strict view of things. And that is playing out so much in B movies. I studied them in college, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's fascinating because monster movies and alien movies are often the place that it's safe to be coded as others. And why people from, I think, different walks of life often gravitate toward horror. It's a safe place to play at it. But then the films of the 50s kind of tried to have their cake and eat it too, of like, well, if you're different in any way, you can kind of explore that in horror and alien and B movies, but then by the end, the movie's always going to really strongly reinforce, particularly, quote unquote, traditional heterosexual union, which is funny because this film, I feel like, is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, is really pushing back on Red Scare and the paranoia that animated those B movies. And then because I think it's kind of trying to have a nice message about indie growing up and evolving, it does end by affirming traditional heterosexual union and nuclear family. But I think it's trying to kind of pull it apart of like, of what are some of the good things about those American values, and what is the absolute real darkness of the Red Scare. Go for it.
No, I think that, and it's definitely important to Spielberg. I think it's really important to George Lucas. It's really important, especially if you've watched all of the Indiana Jones Chronicles, young Indiana Jones stuff, or if, I don't know, seen the prequels. It is big, and this is it's not a pack your bags and I'm leaving this country vibe. It's the other way for George, I think. It shouldn't be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. Your knowledge versus paranoia thing is just a wonderful way to look at it. And I think better kind of encapsulates what I was feeling of when I go to like this trust thing. Again, it starts for me, I was talking about the building blocks earlier. I didn't like the Mac thing back in the day. Like, 3 times? Come on. I remember probably saying that to myself. Either way, I enjoyed the movie. Now to see it, just like, you don't know, you can't know, and you have to be secure in that. There's a trust in that, and you are definitely there. It isn't just simply, we're doing a movie in the 50s. It's a B movie with aliens, interdimensional beings, and the Russians are the enemies, right? Because there was a Darabont script version of this where it was Nazis from South America left over after the war, and there was kind of a discussion between the Harrison, Spielberg, and George about and George kind of holding to like, no, if it's in the 50s, it has to deal with the threat. That was
the Cold War.
The Cold War. But it isn't just they're the bad guys, we're the good guys. And it's certainly, and trust me, again, I have a lot of issues with Stalin's Soviet Union. It both saved and affected my family directly. Mm-hmm. Got the stories. Got horrible stories. But it isn't it's not both sides of them, but it's just like looking at why was this identity formed? That's why the broadband stuff I think is really important. And there's so much identity going on. Are you a greaser? Are you an American? Are you an adventurer, a teacher, a husband, a partner, a communist? Are you a communist? Because you might be next door. That's kind of the vibe of what you're describing in the 50s B movies, right? They could be your neighbor. And that's what was going on. It was this paranoia. And out of that paranoia, of course, people grasp for control. That's Spalko's big thing is she wants knowledge. That's a great thing, but she's going to control people's minds. And what an army she could have if everyone could just follow your beliefs, lock, step, and barrel. Like that's what's at stake in this movie. And I just love it. I love the exploration of it because it's giant to George.
Yeah, it's huge, and it makes a lot of sense of everything I talk about with, Rebel and Flannel, but also like a lot of the themes that are in Indiana Jones, but also in Star Wars about having some amount of distrust with any kind of groupthink, but also deeply valuing people working together and connections and finding that thin line between we are all symbionts. We all need one another and we all work together. But we need to respect one another's difference versus this terror of dysfunctional organizations that become groupthink. And I think that's what's so powerful in the early scenes that you're talking about is, in theory, in this film and in reality, there are forces of authority saying we are in danger. The Russians, the Reds, are infiltrating America and they are controlling our minds. So in response, we're going to have rabid McCarthyism, fear-mongering, and we Americans are going to actually try to control society. So one is paranoia and one is really happening. And I think, Lucas is the stereotypical iconoclast being like, you're the ones doing the things that you should say that should be so afraid of. And Indy is reflecting that. The FBI in this movie is portrayed is just as problematic to Indy is the KGB. In that interrogation scene with the FBI, when Indy talks about another great point of identity of like I was undercover throughout the war. I was OSS, and the other agent says, "Well, we all served." And Indy says, "No kidding. What side were you on?"
Yeah.
And I think that's such a great picture of, hey, America's got lots of problems, but for this brief moment, we defined ourselves as the antithesis of authoritarianism, this controlling lockstep belief system, this no one can be different belief system of the Nazis. Did we not just fight to prevent that? And now you're turning around and doing that and saying we all need to be the same. The not being able to trust Mac is great. That Indy actually does, as you're saying, get blacklisted from his school by the Americans, by the FBI. The Better Dead Than Red group in the college campus. That great scene between him and Charlie, where Indy can't quite trust Charlie. And Charlie has that line about like, well, it's really hard to trust people. So Indy, we know, is this character who wants to know things in a good way, right? It's what animates him. He wants to learn in experience. I had it in my hand, Marcus. I touched it. He wants to know the truth behind the bedtime stories and marry the fantasy with the reality. But he, in the beginning of this film, is at risk of giving in to sheer paranoia. Because who around me can I trust? Because everybody's involved in this Red Scare now. I can't really trust the FBI. I can't trust my colleagues during the war. I can't even trust Charlie. I think he broke. And then Charlie has that great, like, no, I resigned. So I think that really starts this sort of knowledge versus paranoia that even Indy has to push past the instinct to treat everything with utter paranoia.
I absolutely love that. When hysteria reaches academia, I guess it's time to call it a career, says Dean Stanford. And I love the FBI scene you're talking about with Neil Flynn there playing one of the agents. Like it's a little scene, but it's an important scene of what's going on. And again, this is you got other hands on this, writers and Spielberg and all those things, to be clear. But again, the rebel in the flannel again. What is the thing that you and I repeat all the time? George has never said get rid of the Jedi Order. He's just said they got to reconnect with what their actual stated purpose is. That's a big thing with him. So George saying to the American government in this film, if you want to take it that far, of what are you doing? Is this what we fought for? Like you just said, Joseph, or is this the aftermath? This is the post-war Truman Doctrine. All this stuff is now at stake. I like Ike, says Indiana Jones. What identity are we forming here? And what's it based?
Yeah. And I think Spalko is one of the most successful villains, partially just because she's fun and to me played to perfection between being a heightened villain from a fantasy film and also what she's motivated by, like all the great villains in Indy, going back to Belloc's speech about like, we're the same, I'm just a dark reflection of you. I feel like without speechifying that's what's going on with Spalko too, of she loves knowledge like Indy. Like you're saying that line there, one of her first lines, because I know things. I know them before anyone else. She is a student, a historian, maybe not on Indy's level because she keeps needing his help, but she is keeping up with him. And even in those moments where Indy is being forced under duress to help her figure things out. Somebody's life is in danger, so he has to, right? He still gets excited and giddy like a kid. And they have those moments where Indy and the villain Spalko are getting excited together about knowledge and discovery.
Yeah,
so they're like unified on loving knowledge, but then she diverges into using it as a weapon. What were you going to say?
Well, because in that scene, there's a great line. This is the auto writing scene, and there's a great moment with, of course, Cate Blanchett. Heard she's pretty good. Says auto writing. I should have seen this, and it's not done as a villain. It's done as the paranoid person behind it, right? And so it is a moment of celebration. It's a shared moment with them. You're right. They're on the trail here. But I love that little moment of auto writing. I should have seen this, but the fact that I can't control that and I didn't know this. Oh, I'm behind it, and that's kind of the core of the character right there for me.
Yeah. It's like they're having an arms race with knowledge. Even she, has that acknowledgement. Like, well, you got the bomb first, but we're going to get this first.
Yes.
And when Indy is deciphering those auto-written clues from Oxley, he's getting giddy about figuring out, the great stakes, Amazon, obviously, but what's this? And there's no sense of like, you gotta, like he is doing it motivation-wise because they've threatened Marion. But once he has to do it anyway, he's giddy because he loves knowledge. He wants to know the truth. And then I think where they diverge is that for Indy, knowledge is something that brings clarity and connection. It clears away the cobwebs. Well, this was the myth, but what's the truth? And then I can pass that knowledge on to students. And in his adventures, his seeking of knowledge always brings him closer to other people. But for Spalko, it's just a weapon. And I think maybe one of my favorite scenes in all of Indiana Jones is her speech while he's staring into the crystal skull, which is just the paranoia of America, the paranoia of 50s B movies come true. Like this real fun plane of like, what if the things that everybody's yelling about, the Soviets were actually trying to do? I just want to read this real quick because it's so great. Spalko is talking about the power of what the crystal skull will give her as it's yelling at Indy to return it mentally. She says, to place our thoughts in the minds of your leaders, make your teachers teach the true version of history, make your soldiers attack on our command. We will be everywhere at once, more powerful than a whisper, invading your dreams, thinking your thoughts for you while you sleep. We will change you, Dr. Jones, all of you from the inside. We will turn you into us. And the best part, you won't even know it's happening. That could be the log line of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's how aligned it is with the B movie's reflection of the real life fear of the Cold War. What if others are infiltrating us? And yeah, in this film, that's what the Russians want to do. If there were real crystal skulls, I think America and Russia would have competed to both get the mind control power first. But the darker side of it, in the side that I think reflects reality, is that fear of what if the others get inside and change us isn't just about communism, right? That's extending in America at the time to anybody who is different in the slightest way. And I think that's where the real rebel spirit comes in. That's where Indy's real free thinking spirit comes in, of like, this is what the Russian villain is claiming that she wants, but it is also what America is doing in reality with the McCarthyism.
Yes, absolutely. I put this down as, I think again, it's Neil Flynn's agent character says at one point, my country. And it's America in the 1950s marketing of the great American dream. And I think that carries out to where it is now. We still deal with it, still have conversations, this get overtly political, Joseph. This is the episode of just like talking to family members who, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we all had access to some healthcare? No, I can't support that, because then you're in my mind. Then Scotland's in my mind. Then the great American dream, the promise that we have, is in my mind. There's, what can I say, Jonesy? I'm a capitalist, and they pay, and I can't. There's a lot of that, and it stems from this decade. By the way, it's no mistake. When people want to, make things great again, they go back to this decade often. And this dream that was not sold, it was constructed. It was constructed to have some sort of control with what's going on. And the threat's real. Stalin was into psychic warfare. That's based in reality. Whether or not they pulled it off, and we had the men who stare at goats, all that kind of stuff. Got it. But that the Cold War was real, right? And you and I there at the very end. Again, it's fair. I'm Ukrainian Circassian descent. As a kid, I was called a Russian. I called myself a Russian because it's all like Soviet Union. Yeah, I took a shit in the 80s for this stuff, because it was still there. Because how you don't want to be different. God damn it. The Cincinnati Reds baseball team in the 50s for a couple seasons changed their name to the Cincinnati Redlegs and changed their color from red to blue, lest the team be considered communist. That's insanity. Yeah. And that's
America, the land of the free. You must think this way. Yeah. And to be explicitly political, this resonates because it is happening right now. Social media has allowed more people to tell their story. America is a land of many different people coming together in one nation, allegedly. And there are all sorts of people who just want to say, here's my experience. Maybe it's a little bit different than yours, but maybe there are some similarities. But let me tell you about what I've really experienced and how it's different. In this angry reaction to become great again, to go back to this fantasy where no one was different, and how essentially deeply anti-American that is, that we can be different. We should be different. And when somebody tells you what their life experience is, they're giving you the gift of knowledge that will dispel the myths and lead to connection. And other people are trying to get you to believe that when somebody who's different than you just tells you their truth, that it's this, it's paranoia, it's whispers trying to control you. No, it's just another person telling you their truth, giving you the gift of knowledge, and then you choose what to do with it. You choose how it affects your life. But the manipulation is the same as what's going on in this film. It's the thread of the plot of this idea that it's going to be this insidious control. Nobody's controlling you. They're telling you their truth, their knowledge, and you choose how you respond.
Yeah. So I think they have some things to say, this film.
I think so too. An offshoot of all this, to me, that was really interesting in the film, and you and I talked about it, is I think it's got that very traditional Lucas idea of individuality, of free thinking and knowledge is valuable, this film is certainly pro-knowledge, but it's also pro-experiential wisdom of the wisdom you gain from actually doing something yourself. And you and I were joking about the social media comment you saw, like, oh, it's the 50s, we got to hear Elvis Presley. To me, this film starts with, here's the threat. Rigid, angry, controlling, militaristic group in rigid lockstep, contrasted with individualism, free thought, fun. It's hot. It's rock and roll, hot rods, drag racing, a picture of America that's like, here are parts of this era that are maybe not perfect, have a lot to criticize about them. I'm not going to turn this into Elvis Presley Center.
Yeah.
But
or
are
Colonel
coded,
Tom Parker Center.
Colonel Tom Parker Center. But for like the point of that opening scene, our coded is the antithesis of that rigid authority, that fear, that paranoia with, hey, I know you're supposed to you're supposed to go the exact miles per hour that it says in your handbook, but we're playing Elvis, we're having a fun time, we're checking out our hot rods, come on, just drag race a little bit, and nothing bad comes of it. It's this sense, this contrast of the free thinking versus the rigid and the controlling.
No, that's what's up on screen. And again, it could just be as simple as, when you and I talk these themes, I don't always necessarily think that Spielberg is like, all right, we must choose Elvis because of this. It might just be because, well, it's 1957's Elvis. But I also think it's done with great purpose. You're going to watch, think of what you and I were just talking about, the 1950s. Now you got the youth emerging in their hot rods, watching this man gyrate his hips on the television. That's against this vision of the perfect America, chaste America, 2.5 kids. I don't know how you get those kids if you don't watch those gyrating hips, but that's absolutely what's going on there when those kids show up to race the Russians.
Yeah. And it sets the tone, it sets the time. And then there's things throughout it. There's always been a fun tension in the Indiana Jones films between the books and the swagger, between the adventure and the academic. But a couple things pop up where Indy's a little bit more forward on, like, you got to go out there and see things and experience things for yourself. Knowledge, and that knowledge can lead to free thinking. It's a joke because they're in the library, but if you want to be a good archaeologist, you got to get out of the library. Is a meaningful line. The back and forth about Mutt leaving college, but like it's like I'm just kind of straight. He's just kind of chafing against the structure, right? Against the rigidity. But then he's like, but I love reading, and the fencing's great. I love knowledge and love having experience. And Indy's like, yeah, you go get some experience. And it becomes a fun joke of go back to school. But I think the spirit of what he says the first time is what he means is the antithesis of paranoia, of fear, of mind control is thinking for yourself, experiencing things for yourself, deciding things for yourself. And that, I think that's really strong in a film where mind control from a crystal skull obtained by the Russians is the actual thread of the plot. And then the thread of the plot is the actual mind control paranoia going on from the Red Scare of America and the FBI.
It's funny. You think of the knowledge and paranoia, but great stuff there too as well. But the knowledge and paranoia stuff plays out in the quicksand, dry sand conversation. Quicksand. No. I have the knowledge. It's dry sand. We don't have to worry unless, poof. Well, I have the knowledge now. We can be paranoid. It's all mistakes there, even in the comedy.
Yeah, it's a great bit. So I think for me, the knowledge versus paranoia is a huge thing. A couple other things I want to talk about, but I'm curious what other ideas you wanted to focus on.
I think generally all that. I think a lot flows out of it. I put a lot down of the idea of family and connection, the pursuit of what's. You got Mac and the pursuit of gold and money and glory, and I don't mean to diminish that. And I think you did a great job bringing it up early, but it's like it's present in all these movies for good reason, and where he ends up and what he's going through, and it does to me invoke Dr. Elsa Snyder and even some of the Sapto and all the guys at the beginning of Raiders and all that. And the Nazis themselves looking for that stuff. So I think it's not something I want to brush over, but it's to me there was bigger themes that excited me in this film. But it's very clear with Mac and kind of what he's pursuing and why.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wrote down a couple of things about that. Ongoing investigation of, what's the real treasure, the view of treasure hunting. Indy is accused of being a grave robber again early on. There's the actual sign of grave robbers will be shot. And, Indy always insists, I'm not a grave robber, but we do need to go to this gravesite.
Yeah.
There's a nice joke about him being tempted to keep that knife, and then I don't want to keep borrowing yours, but he puts it back. It's a very meta, like, okay, yeah, no, I shouldn't take that. And in the contrast of, they're on the trail of Oriana, the gilded man, because he was so obsessed with gold. The line of I believe from Charlie of there's a museum in the world that wouldn't sell its soul for this lot, contrasted with Indy's, reverent knowledge was their treasure. I don't think it's new or unique for this film. I think it's in place in all the films. I think it's, how is Belloc a dark shadow from Indy? Well, because of this stuff. Why does Indy understand the true power of the Shankara stones? Because they're about defense and protection, not about fortune and glory. It's the real treasure was reconnecting with my pop. It's present in all the films. I think it's remixed here in a good way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, the last big thing is the family stuff and what's going on there. And I think it's why we kind of end up with the traditional union at the end. Is there's a real thing to me of finding connection versus being alone. Charlie's got that great line early on. We seem to have reached the age where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. You get the sense that Indy's in a sense of mourning. He is literally mourning his dad and Brody. He can't trust his contemporaries. The double cross by Mac, the biting Charlie's head off and having to apologize right away. We eventually learn that Indy ran away from the engagement to Marion, breaking it off a week earlier, out of what I think is kind of implied to be fear of, you challenged me and I didn't, you were the one and that scared me. And so I ran away. And then I eventually realized I'm never really going to be happy because you were the one and I ran away. And even being separated from Oxley because of some of his choices. So you get a real sense of Indy being alone, disconnected. Mutt is motivated entirely by the loss and worry for Oxley and his mom. It's why he's there. Even the interdimensional beings, even the MacGuffin, all they want is to be back together again. So I think it really sets up this nice picture of, I think it dovetails with the fear and paranoia and how it isolates you and makes you alone. And then, by the end, Indy is surrounded by family and pushing past his fear and got married to his OTP, as the kids would say today. Happy to be a dad. No qualms about it. Pretty happy about it. And we get that button from Oxley, which it feels like a response to Charlie's line at the beginning, where Oxley says, "How much of human life is lost in the waiting?"
That's a great line,
right?
It's a great line, and to me, and I think there's a lot of ways to interpret that line. For me, it's a personal line of. It's based out of fear, right? Fear of change, fear of chance, fear of risk, fear of redefining yourself. I think you're absolutely right about Indy running away from Marion there. It might have been too much. That's why this theme of kind of redefining your identity, or I say redefining, but maybe finally defining it. It could be also a way to look at it. And where Indy ends up, like I am an adventurer, I am a teacher. I can also try to be this partner and try to be a parent. And that was. I waited too long, but now is now or never. I really love that moment line. I love that you put that down. So it's a deep line.
Yeah, it really affected me in a lot of ways. I think being middle aged, but also recently dealing with the loss of my father-in-law and thinking about inevitably, even with a great relationship, what did I say? What didn't I say? What did I wait for? What am I waiting for now? What am I pushing away out of fear? It's really. It's simple, but it's really, I think, powerful and meaningful. And I think it makes a meal out of Indy and Marion being married. And it takes it away from the sort of 50s films where it's like, no matter how weird and deviant you get with the monsters, Got to have a heterosexual union by the end. It's weird that those two things are sitting together, but it's almost like I think they're on separate thematic tracks.
Yeah, much like the Indiana Jones ride, right? 2 tracks. No, I agree, and it's very much who Indy is, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. We have been, as we examine each of these films, talking about the meaning of the title. Does this one have a greater depth, or is it pretty straightforward for you?
it is about a kingdom of crystal skulls. Is what? No. No. I think kind of straightforward, and it's fun how they arrive to it as well. So, and the history of George wanting to do stuff with crystal skulls. This was the Indiana Jones Chronicles episode with a young Belloc, finding one of these, being obsessed with these. And then the note, and I'm sure you discovered it too, but of George insisting that kingdom be in the title. Love that from the Rebel in flannel.
Yeah, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. There's sometimes I'm like, why isn't it just a little bit more simple and direct, like the Crystal Skull? Right. Because it isn't as evocative. And I think for me, I don't have any sort of like deep. This is the sublayer of meaning, but I do feel like kingdom gives it a different flavor because it really is about Indiana Jones venturing into a physically different world and a world of different beliefs and being open to that. He's entering a different kingdom of knowledge, a different kingdom of understanding.
Yeah, like that.
All right. Well, if you are listening when we have made this available to the public, we are going to take a quick break. If you're listening on Patreon, we will be back instantly. Back in a moment. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed your break, Ken.
I really did. I really did. Handled a couple of business emails, redefined my identity. It's great.
Are you a husband and father now? That was fast.
No.
Well, we love talking about the big ideas of everything we discuss. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, random songs from the 90s. We love talking about the big ideas, but we also like talking about all of the fun stuff and maybe what ideas are attached to the fun stuff. So we're going to discuss some favorite action moments in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, Ken, where do you go?
Action moments. I got to start with a kind of a general overview. I love the opening sequence. I really do. I love the car race for the depth that you and I were talking about, for the Elvis Presley of it all, and just the energy there. I love when we get to Area 51. I do love some good Area 51 lore, and it just kind of works. I don't know, man. It's just a fun, fast-paced sequence. There's a great moment in there. My little beat is Mac after he's revealed his turn, and he's in the car, and he's like, "You don't know him. You don't know him." And I just it's a great. That's the kind of indie friend I want to see. The one who's like, "Oh man, he's crazy." So I'll start there. I just really love that opening sequence.
I agree with you, and I think it is to me that isn't like nostalgia. Yep, we get the shot of the Ark, which I'm fine with. Like, yeah, maybe that's an Easter egg. But it's not the first Ark Easter egg we've had. There's the one in Last Crusade, but beyond that, it's Indy was mad about this back in the 30s that the government's just kind of taking things and hoarding them, and what and black citing it of like, you don't know what it is and you don't get to know, and thanks for your work, Indiana Jones. So it sets the tone, I think, for the film for Indy to be like, I've examined stuff in this place, I've collected stuff that's ended up in this place, but now that that sort of underbelly of the American government, we're right in it. And have an adventure in it is fun. Weirdly, out of that whole opening scene, the beat that spoke to me the most, it's really small, and I love all the magnetic stuff. A lot of whips, a lot of guns, cool, great, a lot of broken glass. It's that quick moment where Indy with no problem just shoves Spalko out of the truck.
Yes.
It's not a big fight scene that will come later with swords and his son. It's just a boop, get out of here.
That's amazing.
And I love the pretty consistent, like, hey, I'm not. There's no gender dynamics there. Like, get out of the truck. I do this to Belloc, and I'll do it to you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Love that. That's great.
Yeah. Where do you go from there?
Well, I was going to say too, as far as the arc reference, I loved it in theaters. I loved it now. Like I don't know. It doesn't have to be taken anything more than what it is. That to me is a fun. I don't even call those Easter eggs. I think that the term Easter egg is so misused these days, but which is fine. Sometimes words and phrases get redefined, and that's okay. It's part of the thing. But yeah, it's just it's fun, and that's okay every now and then. I loved it.
Yeah, I think at some point in my mind, when I hadn't seen it for years, there was like an Indiana Jones double take in it, and I love that it's almost just there for us, the audience, to know that. To be reminded, this place is full of incredibly deadly items.
Yeah.
That could go off, at any moment. It's a fun nod, and it raises the tension for me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Where do you go next?
I jump all the way. Well, not all the way. It's not too far. This movie moves, I'd say, pretty fast. It's a little longer than the other ones, right? All indie movies have that wonderful breakneck speed, and this one. You look down, you look up, you're like, we're in Peru already. Like it moves fast. So anyways, side note for myself, but jumping ahead, I actually really enjoy, there's going to be a lot in the comedy, but the greaser versus jock fight into the agent chase, is it's like classic indie in the time period that this film set in. And I really like it. And, I think even just in terms of, indie movies have that tradition of the exposition scenes, and I think that cafe scene is a great exposition scene between the two of them. Like, it gets a lot done.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. I remember in 2008, I think when I did engage in any conversations, I would just tell people how much I loved, and it felt like absolutely classic indie in the bike scene, where he gets off the bike into the car, punches a few people, gets out the other side, and back on the bike again. Like that's classic indie of switching vehicles during a chase.
Yeah,
and the feet dragging. I love that beat in this whole thing. It's great. I'm going to jump back to the infamous nuke scene. Again, as always, if it doesn't work for you, so be it. We're all different. But in the obsession with whether or not it works, it's realistic, too realistic, takes you out of the fantasy. The way all of that is shot, and the classic adventure serial of it, I escaped this one thing, now I'm into this even bigger problem. I remember in the theater in 2008, before the escape happened, I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And it's shot so well, how creepy it is, his realization, his desperation. That scene as an action scene that's just building tension is phenomenal, and it does fit in so much to everything we're talking about. By the end of the film, Indy, out of true desire for connection, is happy to push past his fear and his paranoia and be married and have a son and have these new identities that you're talking about. But then there's this great weird reflection of this is America's greatest fear, that something would disrupt this artificially constructed version of what America is, of the perfect family in a suburb where no problems can be spoken about. We don't have any problems. Our only problem is that outsiders might destroy this.
Yeah.
That gets set up by the nuke scene as well. So I do love the nuke scene.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. And it set me on that rabbit hole of just researching a lot of that too. Just crazy stuff.
Yeah, bonkers, scary, weird stuff. What are more action beats for you?
I did. My note was just this: the fridge scene, you jerks. So I still like it as well. I apologize, jumping a little bit ahead.
That's fine.
A couple things there. There's the moment when they're both. This is the post reveal of Marion, post reveal of Mutt being his son, and they're having the. I think the great argument there, which is also it's very real, but it also serves as distraction to escape. And Indy kicks the Russian, and then Shia Mutt does as well. And it's totally like a father like son moment. I thought it was in perfect concert with each other. I love that kind of beat coming out of that kind of banter between, especially it's Marion, and that I love that. So I love that escape, because Indy's always got to find a way to escape, and sometimes it's dumb luck, and other times it's an opportunity he takes or a risk, and I love it.
Yeah, and I love how much there's that father-son dynamic and resistance and back and forth, and that then let's have a nice father-son bonding moment by kicking a guy in the head in the exact same way. Aw,
Yeah.
That's genetic. I really like the scene in when they're on their way to finding Orlana's corpse.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about the real world politics of the deeply ambiguous indigenous people and their fates in this film. So I'll put an asterisk there.
Mm-hmm.
But the descending into this temple, and there's terrifying figures and skull masks, and the indie move of blowing the dart back. That's I'm troubled by some of it, but the action moments, great. And that's one of those other beats of when I was rewatching this film after many years ago, going like, what the hell was the problem? That's great.
Yeah. And it's not just a fresh controversy about this scene. Back in the day, 2008, this was part of it. I think even Peru itself had something to say about this, if I remember some of the stuff.
I don't remember that, but it does not surprise me.
Yeah. But the sequence itself, it's got a great horror vibe to be as well. I remember the trailer. Maybe it was a trailer where they revealed some of this, and it's spooky in a very Temple of Doom way, and I like that part of it.
In a great growing moment where there's that great shot of Indy up there triumphant, and you're a teacher. Yeah. I'll jump way ahead now, Ken, to the infamous maybe sword fight.
Okay. Yeah.
I really like the actual sword fight. I love a lot of that chase, and I love a lot of the not just getting pummeled like his old man by Spalko, but he's been tooting his horn about his fencing skills and the great jokes about his mom kind of coaching him. The sword fight itself is great. And for anybody who listens to Force Center regularly and is sometimes like, I wish they'd talk about what they don't like, it's your lucky day. I think I'd love one crotch shot to Mutt. What feels like 27 crotch shots are not for me.
Yeah. This is one of those moments that you look at the era. I think for me, looking at it a little bit today, this scene was always going to be in the movie, but kind of in the shooting process, Spielberg had the idea of what should be on cars, right? And to me, that has a little bit of that energy of, well, because we can do that now. Like, it's going to look better. And yeah, you know what? If they maybe tried this in 1980 or in the late 70s shooting Raiders, maybe it actually would have been two stunt people on cars fighting, moving cars. And this is a different vibe. It's put together differently. I get that. So I think that's why it rubs for me as well. I think it's more dynamic than being on the ground. And my point to all that is this is like, going to the monkey. We want to jump to the monkeys. I love monkeys. I don't love the monkey swinging stuff as maybe as other people do. But I think, again, it's one of those things of, well, why can't we? We can do it. Let's try. And I don't fault that spirit. I just think over the years, the nuke fridge takes the headlines, which is not fair to the scene, I don't think. But I think this is some of the stuff. But this wasn't just the film. Right. And this still, this conversation pops up again with some of the Marvel stuff. Big third act fights might all have blah, 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 Transformer fights. And it's so confusing. And, it's not
muddy CGI. Yeah.
Yeah. Pacing of editing always changes over time. Seriously, go back to a film in, 1961. This would have been a slow fight with a lot of dialogue. It just, we speed up as society. That's fine. So anyways, I'll end my kind of rambling thing there. I'm with you on it. The whole sequence works for me on paper, like we said up top. I just think, this was a lot of what was going on at the time in film, and still at times happens.
Yeah. In my memory, the entire thing is a little over CGI'd. But watching it again is like the actual sword fight when the cars are close together. I love that. That's great action adventure. And if you're gonna have a sword fight, you should always be in a high place or physically moving on a vehicle. It always, it is fun escalation. It really is those crotch shots. It's the repetition of the joke. It's the fact that he full on grabs himself. If it was one, in the 80s, it would have been a stunt person with some, huge wad of,
Yeah.
newspaper, and, they would have, somebody else would have been in a car and would have just whapped that man,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the fact that it goes on and on. And for me, it doesn't work as a joke, and you feel the CGI much more, to the point where I rewatched the actual sword fight. Like, that's great. It's the crotch shots that are the problem for me.
Yeah. Again, for me, just overall how things were packaged, even to the ants scene. It's not even that it's one step too far for me. I mean, it's creepy in a wonderful way, but like, it's that weird debate, like we said up top, of well, I like practical. You don't necessarily like practical. You just like the way it felt or looked. This is the old Phantom Menace, had more practical shots than the other. Blah blah blah. Those kind of things that go on. BB-8's practical for 1 out of every 10 shots. It's just like it's a weird talking point, but like it just stood out, and it stood out in 2008 to me, and it still stands out to me now. On paper, again, every indie film has its creep moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rats and snakes and bugs and tarantulas, and this movie, ants, killer ants, big damn ants, and so I think it works for me. It is again, I'll say of its time, and it falls short at the end. For me.
Yeah. You know what? That one didn't, because I was so into it. I forgot. I remember that they fight in a clearing, but it's like, how does that happen? Oxley using the skull. I think I like the big damn ant fight, because the whole thing is so pulpy. Even these ants are like, no.
Yeah.
We know to avoid that. We don't want to stare into that. That's what creates the fighting room. And then I'd gone into this trying to remember, how much does Kingdom of the Crystal Skull bring back some of the darker, pulpier elements that are there in Raiders, and then amped up in Temple of Doom. And I like it's that it's not just that they devour him, but that they carry him off to parts unknown for reasons unknown. My pulp loving heart just really responded to that this time around.
Would you call it some kind of ant hell? Like
some kind of big damn ant hell? I've heard that bedtime story. The ants get you down there.
Yeah.
They crawl in your body and they animate you. Yeah. So moving on from the ant fight, I got a couple more. How about you?
I did put in there, there's some great comedy in it too. But I do like the dry sand rescue. It's got some old classic tension for me as well. And I enjoyed that as well. I wanted to highlight that scene. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and that's a great moment to have the revelation and all that. I like that Marion. I kind of wish Marion got a few more action beats, but I like her driving the car boat off the cliff. That's a favorite action moment.
Well, especially there's a little. I don't think it's super intentional, but there's a little bit of mom, dad, and kid out for a drive, and there's some arguing, and I'll stop this car vibe, and don't go that way, honey. Yeah, I liked it in a way.
Yep. That is great. This is stretching the definition of action, but I love the shot of the interdimensional beings becoming one. It's very pulpy. It is playing with these themes of what is sort of a communism, groupthink, McCarthyism to be feared, and what is coming together and being stronger out of being united. And that way to look at humanity is we are all part of one large construct, which that idea is so prevalent in Star Wars. And there's nothing about the interdimensional beings that's being presented as dangerous groupthink. It's about this next level evolution where we can be independent beings, but also one. And the shot is cool, and the idea is cool to me.
Yeah, no, and it's aligns with the what they're trying to get to in terms of the 50s films, but the idea and that was one of the first. This ending and everything, and it's big, right? And if you're not expecting the film to go that way, I get you might not like this, might not like the whole movie, but you might not like this MacGuffin and all that kind of things. And I've even seen Spielberg have some, people don't like the MacGuffin, but this was one of the first cracks in the critiques for me. again, that's why I go to the 1950s sci-fi thing of, well, yeah, that's what they were doing. That's what this is about. Like you know, Molarov pulled a heart out. An 800-year-old knight was waving at you. Now there's aliens. What else? Why wouldn't you expect that? I don't know. It just something that, and so that's when and we're not talking 2008. We're talking like 2014, 2015, 2016. I kind of had this like, well, wait a minute. Like, why was that rejected? Maybe it's the look, feel, I don't know. And again, but this is Indiana Jones, right? This wasn't Air Force 2, the sequel where aliens suddenly showed up.
Yeah, to me, it's that exploration, that sense of play of why not, of that it's in line to me with all the other. I understand people who are like, I like my genres separate. It's like not wanting, dishes on your plate to run together. And like some people are like, yeah, let them run together. Yeah. But other people like, if my applesauce touches beans, I'm throwing this entire plate away, And I think there's a little bit of that energy of this is science fiction in Indiana Jones is not science fiction. And if anybody feels that way, fair enough. This movie might not be for you. But from my perspective, all of the genre that they're building from, the pulps, the paperbacks, the adventure serials, they all have this same idea that Indiana Jones has of what if there's truth to the bedtime stories? What if there is something more slightly outside of our understanding out there? And that extends to ancient stones that can protect a village and cults that can summon powers from ancient gods to knights that can live forever, to actual blessings from biblical artifacts. All of those things. And to me, it's like, yeah, they're interdimensional beings. Ultimately, it's this idea of something more out there, that there's a whole pantheon of otherworldly ideas, and they're all valid in this world.
No, well said. And just so I don't sound like a complete grump and everything, personal taste and all that stuff, I totally get it. It's just, so not pushing back. And again, if you don't like this movie for X number of reasons, you don't like this ending, you don't like the interdimensional beings being there, totally fine. I don't know. It's just one of those things of this is kind of the stuff you're signing up for with this series. So there you go. I don't know.
No, I agree with that. I get grumpy about the same thing too, of many things when they tell you what they are, it's okay if you don't like them, but embrace them for what they are. And that's what this is. And it's never not going to be that.
Yeah. And I think part of it is you look at Raiders is a little more grounded all the way through. We discussed even the characters of Brody and Sala are played a little differently in Last Crusade. I think they're just extensions of the characters, and we got to spend more time with the characters, but, and I think they're also damn funny, but I get that, but even Raiders ends, and wherever you stand on the Bible or religious beliefs, that could be completely as crazy as aliens to you as well. But I sometimes maybe that comes from Raiders playing it a little straight until then. Maybe I don't know, but it's still there. It's still present.
Yeah, and I think it's just a little bit, I don't know, darker. I don't know. Yeah. This is plenty dark for me. That's my final action beat that I like, is the destruction of Spalko.
That's great.
And this is very directly now we're into cosmic horror. This is very directly what's at stake in the Lovecraftian pantheon of outer gods, of Cthulhu, where the fear and the paranoia there is that the characters in Lovecraft stories are often academics and intellectuals who think that they have categorized the world and that there's nothing out of their understanding. And then there are these beings from other realms that are literally beyond comprehension, and they're awful. But it's also this sense that it's awful that there could be something that I can't ever fully wrap my head around and control. And Spalko's destruction is about they're playing fair. And if she was like, I would like to know, what happens 100 years from now, or who wins the Cold War, they probably would have just told her, but she wanted everything.
Yeah.
And it isn't that they gave her the history of Earth. It's that they gave her everything from every dimension of reality, every unknowable, impossible thing, more than any one being is meant to contain. It's such a cosmic horror idea, and I really love it.
I love it. Her line, "I want to know everything I want to know." I really enjoy it. It's thematically rich, like you're saying here, and just how you use knowledge, how you're gonna swing that knowledge stick might be also what's going on there. But also, and again, I'm sorry to beat this drum, but how is this any? I don't know. How's it any worse than Paul Freeman's head exploding? Excuse me, a clay model of Paul Freeman's head exploding. And this is one of those things of, I hear, CGI and everything. Totally. And we just discussed some of the parts where maybe it didn't work for us, but I don't know. This is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I watched Toad's head burn off.
Yeah. Works great for me. I love it. One of my favorite action moments.
I mean, watching Walter Donovan get old in seconds is terrifying to me. It also looks like a Tim Burton, early Tim Burton film, and it's just because you couldn't do much more than that. That moment would look like this now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Any other action moments for you before we move on to comedy?
No, sir.
Well, let's talk comedy. Overall, I still think for me, Last Crusade is probably the funniest, but this had a lot of great one-liners, and in some ways, I think this one had even more one-liners that kind of had a little bit of a depth to them, or a twist, or a surprise.
Yeah. No, I like that. No, I had a lot of things down here. One of my first early ones was "Drop the Guns" or "Colonel Dr. Spalko is dead." I just thought that was fine. And the delivery and the dismissive tone behind Indy's voice was great.
Yeah. My first is early on of "Put your hands down, will you? You're embarrassing us."
Yeah.
I love Indy's like, "Yeah, I've been around," including like, "I know how to surrender to Russians and you're doing it wrong."
Yeah.
That was a great one for me. What are some others for you?
I'm on board with the "I like Ike" line. I think that's funny and timeless in a lot of weird ways. I enjoy that. Also, just like one of those, like, if is that what you're gonna say is your last words? Like, it's a joke. It works for me there. And then I love it. And it was a trailer moment I remember too. But I don't know, Indiana Jones swinging on the light, missing, falling back near the truck, and saying, "Damn, I thought that was closer." I know we got a fifth movie coming out with Indy even being older, but like this was what this movie was also about. He's the hero, but he's also older. And there was something I really enjoyed about that moment.
Yeah. And I like that it wasn't he was swinging and his back went out. It's
yes, right.
That he would have made this kind of mistake previously, perhaps. And they just didn't move away from the age thing, like, not as easy as it used to be, set up. And there is some great stuff. I remember Harrison Ford saying it at the time and reading it again about like, I don't want to ignore my age. I'm not dyeing my hair. I want people to think about age differently. And some success there. I don't think it's just this film, but
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that.
I really like the low scrub for radiation. To me, that this film is, to my tastes, an example of how to do a crotch joke, an example of how not to do a crotch joke.
Yeah.
And the low scrub for radiation is just, it's all in the face. It's all in the sort of like the how rude it is and how upsetting it is, and the pulling it up versus the continued CGI whacking and the physical grab. Yeah.
Love that. Love that moment too. In that when the agents show up and Neil Flynn, who was on Scrubs, right, was first kind of was known, especially at the time. I love it. It's such a callback to William Hooken's line, but when he says to Indy, "Of great interest," it's very much top men to me, and I just I like the difference there.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. For me, I jumped a little bit ahead for my next one of that. What you were saying of the good exposition scene, the good fight scene, in the restaurant. I really liked Indy's delivery on "hit this guy, Joe College, hit him hard."
I love it. No, right? I love it. And that Sasha Spielberg is the girlfriend in that scene. She's the one that punches Shy. I love that Joe, and that's what he's listed as the credits as. Joe College.
Yeah, I laughed enough at just "hit this guy." It's so Indy. It's so Harrison Ford, and it's I think it's extra funny to me because we're in this moment, we're really seeing Indy through Mutt's eyes of like some academic is totally out of touch, with his hep young man ways that it's got to be so unexpected for Mutt.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because I have a lot of Mutt stuff earlier of just even showing up on the bike and doing the Marlon Brando thing there, and hey old man on the train is something we all will face if you haven't always,
Yep.
And that whole sequence, the Indy and Mutt talking, and then you get him taking the beer bottles and Indy replacing them in the cafe. He has the line, and maybe going back a bit what we were saying, where he says like, you're a teacher, that's going to be a big help. Oxley and his mom have sent him to this man that he knows nothing about, and he's expecting a Jedi Knight, and he just got Yoda. It's
right. Yeah. Where do you go from here?
Oh well, sorry. There's another line there I love too. It's it's an Indy line, but maybe I realized it's a line I would say, and that's what I like to do. Is just see those two bricks at the counter. I don't think they're here for the milkshakes. Something I really love about that. You mentioned earlier, but the Soviet agents kind of running into the Red Scare protests before running into Marcus Brody's statue. I think back in 2008, I thought, Marcus Brody's statue and head saved the day. But I think the better dead than red protest as Russians run through it is pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah. I do like in the library when it's Colin Hanks, right? Who's
yes,
I think I read in the wiki, who's asking for some advice, and it's definitely heightened. No reaction to the fact that he slid through in a motorcycle, but that's what makes it funny.
Yeah. Love that. In that sequence, I'm trying to think. Sorry, I lost my. You know what? Is it? I was looking. Is it? I think it might be Chet Hanks. Not Colin.
Chet Hanks, yes.
Sorry. I just, it's funny. I saw that in an article a month ago, and I couldn't remember who it was, and you were right there. Hanks. The Wilhelm scream showing up, being used by a student about to be hit by the motorcycle is hilarious to me. It's such a hey, we're gonna put it in here.
Yeah. That, it makes sense to me that it is as much as I love it of it being retired, because you really do hear it these days.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where it is, but Mutt says to Indy, "What are you, like 80?"
Yep.
Which is a mildly funny line to me, given just this film, but the fact that Dial of Destiny, he is like exactly 80. It really made me laugh, and it made me smile, because I really do think it I remember in 2008, like ancient 60-year-old Harrison Ford is going to be Indiana Jones again, and now we're all pretty like, yeah, man. And then look at what Liam Neeson's been doing.
Yeah.
Here we go.
No, it's a reminder of both how time can move fast, but also try to be present to where you are. Because you look. I even watching this movie, Crystal Skull. Like, look how young Indy looks. It's just, so be where you are. Be there now, friends. Yeah. I love that line too.
Yeah, don't spend your entire life feeling old before you are, because you'll look back on those photos where like, hey, I felt so old. Oh, I look so young. Yep. I really like the grave robbers will be shot sign after all of the people throughout the films accusing him of being a grave robber, and then having it come true of like by poison darts, but they will be shot. Yeah, that one was good for me. And I mentioned it already, but I really like that you're a teacher, and then the part-time, which I think was a real trailer moment.
Yes.
Back in 2008, but it is one of my favorite things about Indy, the books and the swagger, and that they're both part of his character, and how much people, to your point about identities, how what a hard time people have reckoning with his sort of dual identities.
Yeah. And once again, you see all through this movie, the professional side of him is tremendously important to Indy, as it always has been.
Yeah, including he gets a little bit more pedantic in the field, like talking about the difference between quicksand and dry sand.
Oh, yeah, no, I love that, and the motorcycle scene in the hall, with the Hank scene, I love that.
Yeah. One more for me, right in this area, is when they are making the discoveries of some of the drawings in the crystal skull, and Mutt says, "No, God's head isn't like that," and Indy's got that great. Depends on who your God is.
Yeah.
It's a funny line to me, because it's almost played like a tough guy line. I'm telling you how it is, kid. But a lot of times when gruff older men are telling you like how it is, they're not actually making an argument for diversity of perspective, which is what's going on in the line.
Well, yeah, and I to me, there's a direct call out to Young Indiana Jones Chronicles with the Pancho Villa stuff, but this to me is reminiscent of the lessons learned with the Leo Tolstoy episode, and even from Lawrence of Arabia, of different perspectives from different religion and religious beliefs. I think that rings very true for Indy. I think it's a great little moment.
Yeah, and I think I think there's great episodes to call out, and he's had experiences with things like the Shankara stones. Like there are a lot of beliefs, and they all have power.
Yep.
Yeah. Where do you go from here?
I do. You mentioned I enjoy him putting the knife back. I was just gonna borrow it. I'll put it back. I love that. There. Yeah, it's funny.
Great delivery.
Yeah, I like when he's being interrogated by Spalko, and she's kind of explaining. It's like a second exposition scene there, and he just goes, "Saucer men from Mars," and it's both works for me of a reminder of what this film is going for in a lot of ways, but also it's one of those moments where, and there's sometimes that tension with the character of Indiana Jones, where it's just like you seem not to believe in a lot of things, yet you've also witnessed everything. Like, it's fascinating. So I always want to say to him, like, why wouldn't it be Saucer men, Indy?
Yeah, and even a couple beats later, there's a fun thing where she's talking, ranting about using its power, and he's like, "Not a good idea." And it's kind of got the little head shake, and that it seems like he's picturing. Well, I guess he can't picture it because his eyes were closed. But I think he's picturing what he saw when he opened his eyes at the end of Raiders.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
That's great.
Once we get into the Marion stuff, I feel bad I didn't write down much stuff because I just got caught up in it. But I treasure Indy's reaction to seeing Marion. Like, there's about to be the beat coming up, the great standard comedy beat where Indy assumes she's running to him and then runs to Mutt and figures it out and all that. But when he sees Marion come out of the tent and he's got this giddy reaction like a kid. It's a real change of tone, and I think it's just a great acting moment by Harrison Ford because it's funny, but it also it tells the story of he's maybe been pining for her a little bit, and beating himself up for letting the one get away. Yeah,
no, I agree with that, and I think Karen Allen's so great in this role, and I think going back to 2008, I didn't focus on that as much. And I agree. You said maybe a couple more action beats or something like that, but she's real present in the film, right? She's there. She's on the adventure in the end, and I think I overlooked that 2008 a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of their banter is really great. I feel bad I didn't have time to go back and write down my individual favorites, but I love that they're excited to see each other. They're mad at each other. There's everything. It's right back.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of my favorite little moments is when he has they all have the same problem. They weren't you, and they do that. They're looking at Mutt, and they pan over to her, and she's just got that big smile. It's Indiana. It's Indiana.
It's
Indiana
so good.
Jones. Yeah.
It's so good. I like the beat of him needing to call the snake a rope. That is really funny to me. Of like, and it's always been part of the charm of Indiana Jones is he is this fantasy. Adventurer and a lot of masculine stuff going on, but he's always been fallible. And this was a fresh way to get into the snake thing. Like, call it a rope. Call it a rope.
Love that.
Yeah. I just got a couple more. How about you?
Same. I do like his line to Oxley. You were never this interesting. It was funny to me. The quicksand lesson is great. Again, I think it's thematically rich, but also just really funny too. And then final one for me is big damn ants. Go.
Yeah, that is great. I'm just be saying that all the time now. Big damn ants. Yeah, just as a swear. Two more for me. We were talking about this, about kind of the back and forth of like, Indy can be skeptical because I think he hears so many myths, and we hear the ones where he finds some truth in them, but there's some other where he's BS, right? So he's always a little. But by the time they're actually standing before 13 crystal skulls of interdimensional beings, there's crystal skeletons, and Spalko says something to him about not believing, and he's got that great. Oh, I believe, sister. That's why I'm back here.
I love what I love. Sisters, it's a honey to marry it. I don't know. It's old school, but I like it.
It is old school. And my final favorite beat is a great Marion beat of not waiting for their permission to go in for the kiss, right? Or not letting taking the lead. Taking the lead. Yeah, it's so great.
Agree with that.
All right, we are heading toward the end. Is there anything that you struggled with or question in the film?
I think I put on the table some of the big things that I call it the 2008 of it all. And I mean, seriously, it's there's great years to celebrate in film and music. 1999 for films, a fascinating year to study, all those years. 2008's an interesting year. Go back and look what came out. Go look at where we are now and how that's one of the years where we are now kind of really started to take hold. And this is part of it. And I think therefore the movie sometimes gets overlooked. I think the movie gets undervalued because of a lot of the stuff in that era. This compared to A Dark Knight, I get it, right? It feels and looks different. And Nolan was doing his thing. This movie's doing its thing. And so, especially if you're, late 20s, early 30s, you might want a little bit more of Nolan at this time in your life. And that's completely fair. And I did too. Casino Royale. I keep going back to that. No sick, right? I mean, it's a little different and dark and gritty emerged from this year to me. Like that, it was present before. Yes, to be clear, Batman Begins as well. But like that being a talking point or a desire kind of is one of the things that spills out of this year. And this movie was up against that, I think, more than maybe we gave credit at the time or knew at the time. We had the benefit of history. And so therefore some things that I struggle with or question just is how it looks and how it feels, not necessarily what they were going for.
Yeah. Love the ideas. Love the tone, the pacing, the dialogue, the character ideas, all the wrestling with the big ideas we talked about. And yeah, I do feel a little bit of the difference of not being on location as much and not having some of those as rich, just, big widescreen vista shots of a real place and all that. We mentioned it, but I think the Indiana Jones, we've talked about it in greater depth, Temple of Doom, the Indiana Jones series, I think, has some moments where, in my opinion, its heart is in the right place in the way it talks about what are real treasures. And more often than not, India is trying to return and restore and respect things. But that said, with the updating of the Adventure serial, there are those moments where tropes, less sensitivity about real people in the real world are getting updated and brought into the present of the time. And I think in this one in particular, it just feels like, well, we want him to be in a temple in South America and we want something scary. So here's ambiguous South American indigenous people. And yes, it's self-defense, but the people in the skull mask in that scene that I otherwise love they're defending their space. Yeah. And yes, it is the Soviets who viciously slaughter the other large group of indigenous people we meet, but it's still just slaughter of indigenous people, which that's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
ongoing conversation. Yeah.
An ongoing conversation. And yes, I will let people with even more and better perspective say more than it's a bummer. The other thing for me is I refreshed myself on all of the ups and downs of Shia LaBeouf's career, and that's a little bit of a bummer. There's a history of strange plagiarism, a history of assault charges, a trial that's coming up, messy split from the recent film Don't Worry, Darling. From the outside, without making any huge judgments, just definitely does seem like a person who is struggling in that struggle. Other people are perhaps being hurt, so that's a bummer.
Yeah, no, it's a bummer, and I for one, think he's a really fantastic actor, and I love so much of what's done in this film, and that should not hide anything else that's happened, and I don't say that with that intention, but I think even at the time in 2008, and he had some comments, of I let the legacy down, or say he could basically, talk down at this movie based on the reaction, and then kind of got a talking to from Harrison Ford and Spielberg, and he's later addressed that as well. But I think you really did a great job in this film. So yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, the bigger picture is something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, I agree. I like the choice of the character of let's make him have plenty of the spirit of his father, but he is of his time, and a little bit of like Indy can look at him and go, what is this kid doing? What did he just dip a comb in soda pop?
Yeah.
What's with the kids these days? I like the choice to make him have the spirit of Indy, but totally the expression of his time. And I think the choice to have him be present, be a huge part of the film, but really have it be the film is still about Indiana Jones. I think he plays it really well to be a main character, but there's no sense to me. Even the last shot is joking around with it. There's no sense that this is the setup for future Indiana Jones.
Yeah, sorry. I remember that was. I understand why that'd be the thought, right? But I don't even remember. And I don't mean this as a challenge, or I'd love someone to pull an article or any news from the day where this was ever thought of. I don't really think that was the case. I think it had more meaning for what you're talking about if this is Indy's story. Again, it would make sense. I get why you think that from the shot. You got this at the time, younger hot actor, a hot commodity in Hollywood. Let's continue it in this way. There was more rumors to me of them doing that, looking to do that with River Phoenix, maybe. Until his tragic death. I don't remember at the time. I think we felt that, but this is like when we would face the Last Jedi arguments of like, oh, now Broom Kid's gonna be the star of the next one. That's not what it's saying. That's your cynicism. I think has a little more legs in that, just because of the actor at this time in his career. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I've always had kind of that thought of. I just don't think that's fair to the moment. I think it was about Indy. Yeah.
Well, and I think it was also I'm remembering conversations of 2008 where 65 was older to be an action star than it is now. So I think there was a little bit of that cynical, like, well, of course they're going to want to make more, and he can't possibly make another one after this. So by introducing his son, they're clearly just trying to introduce Indy 2.0 for future films. There's a lot of 2008 perspective in that conversation that I remember. And it's fun watching the film again where he is tied to Indy and he is Marion's son too. And I think it's played really well to be the spirit, but he's not a replacement.
Yeah, agree with that.
Anything else that we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
No, I think we got it all. I do love the mention of the Pancho Villa episode of Young Indiana Jones even more now. I liked it then because it was like that was one of the only episodes I remembered, right? Because the show at the time was kind of a faint memory in the back of my mind. But now spending a lot of time on that show in the last month, it's great. It's by the way, it's a great episode. You want to know George's thoughts on the American war machine, America's penchant for violence, leaders overall, and what they do. It's a pretty deep episode. I think Indy picked up some lessons there.
Yep, and I loved it. I loved that like I'm sure Lucas would have been like, when we can mention this and we can mention that, and he met Freud.
Yep.
And this just fit in nicely. I think people, probably didn't. A lot of people probably didn't know that was an Easter egg. That's an actual Easter egg. Yeah. It just fit in perfectly. I pulled two sentences that just made me laugh from Wikipedia that I wanted to share.
Okay.
It's not so much the information, it's the way that they're written in Wikipedia. Bless wiki editors. Here's the first one. Blanchett learned defense for the character, but during filming, Spielberg decided to give Spalko karate chop skills. It really is that one scene where she's just like, doing the real stereotypical karate chops all over Mutt's body.
Yeah, it's like, I think is it Wayne's World or Wayne's World 2 of karate chops. Yeah, it's a bad joke almost. Yeah, that's seems like such a George thing too.
Yep. So, and then here's the final one. LaBouffe pulled his rotator cuff while filming his duel with Spalko, which was his first injury in his career, an injury which worsened throughout filming. He later pulled his groin.
So there you go. Too many crotch shots.
Too many crotch shots. I just also love that way it's structured, because it sounds like he could have pulled his groin in 2017. It doesn't sound like it's actually related to the filming.
That's amazing.
Who among us? All right, we're going to go to our fun question to wrap up. Ken, if you could ask an interdimensional being, not for all knowledge, but just one bit of knowledge, what would you ask the interdimensional being?
Man, that's crazy because over the course of time, be like, who win the World Series this year? And when my Dolphins get back to the Super Bowl, will there ever be a new Star Wars film? Now I think I want to ask, am I going to get a good night's sleep or something tonight? It'd be something real simple about just being here now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would push against that, those deep desires of, what's the fate of the world? When will I pass on? Will I ever achieve this? And like maybe something real simple, like I struggle to keep a cactus alive. It should be easy. How do I keep a cactus alive?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I don't want to know the rest. I don't want to know my end. I want to live each day like it's my last. I don't need all that. The alien would just be like, well, this is boring. No, you're not going to sleep tonight.
Yeah. The alien's like, here's something easy. You're going to have to pee at 3:30 a.m. There you go.
It's your wallet's going to wake you up at 4 again. That's what you got.
All right. That is our big look at Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and we did it. We surpassed the length of the film by about 2 minutes. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. So actually, I'm shocked this episode isn't longer, Ken. I'm going to pitch it to you to take us home.
Yeah, I stopped myself on talking about 1950s America. Oh, I've got some thoughts. But anyways, hey, everybody. We are the Force Center Podcast feed. We can be found on Twitter at Force Center Pod. We're on Instagram, YouTube as well. Subscribe over there so you don't miss live shows and all those fun things. Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. Podcast available in a lot of different spots. Just search. You'll find us. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center. Special shout out and thanks to all those who have been supporting, but all those who came on board when we announced the series and wanted to join us on this journey leading up to Dial of Destiny. The episodes, after this recording session, we're going to start making a move to making them public so everyone can hear. But we really appreciate those that have made this possible. You gave us the confidence more than anything to do this look at Indiana Jones. So thank you, sir. Follow me at Kidnaps. Thank you, sirs and ma'ams, and all you folks out there, I should say. You can follow me at Kidnapsuck or Kidnapsuck.com. Joseph, you.
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media, all sorts of it. Instagram, TikTok. I can't even remember all of it. Twitter, Blue Sky. That's the new one I was trying to remember. Find me everywhere at Joseph Scrimshaw.
Absolutely. All right. So that's it, kids. That's it, friends. So for all the snakes that we need to call ropes, that's it for Force Center. See you next time.